This is an age of disruption, of profound revolutionary change.
What we're really asking ministers is to empower the ambassadors.
The only thing that you really push forth is the truth.
You don't see many women represented when it comes to the decisions as to how to handle the pandemic.
Hi, good afternoon. Welcome everybody. It's here in person. Just let a few people take their seats. My name is Joshua Pisana. I'm a senior policy reporter for Politico Europe, based usually between Berlin and Brussels. Welcome to what I would argue is the most interesting and most important sessions of the Sustainable Future Week, and that's about decarbonizing transport, specifically fast-tracking green mobility. We have a number of sessions this afternoon for you, two specifically here on this stage dealing with road transport, then breakout sessions only for those on the ground here on railways, on maritime, and on aviation too. Before we get started, I just need to go through various notes I have prepared for me here. I've got to thank our partners for making this summit possible. Our leading partners are Coca-Cola in Europe, GE and SQM. The presenting partners are Braskem, CFIC, Google, MAN Truck and Bus, Ørsted, PepsiCo and PGE, and the networking partner, Chiesi and 3M. Thank you guys. A few housekeeping rules to go through, relevant both for the people here and also at home watching on the live stream. You can use the swap card platform, which is hooked up to an iPad that I have here, which will allow you to ask questions should you feel you would like to. For those in the room anyway, there'll be a separate session at the end of this panel where we have a debate only for those in the room, where you can pitch questions to the people we have on the panel coming up in a second. If you were joining in person, you can scan the QR code, which is apparently rotating on a screen I can't see, and you can use that to ask questions too. Because the green transition is a systemic one, we also have an artivist. I learned that word yesterday. Janina Rosita is here at the Sustainable Future Week, and you can check out her work there in the background. Also, Esther Favero, a cartoonist, is here, and we'll have work shown for those in attendance here today. Yeah, and also I just found out that the badges you all have here on the ground you can use in your garden to make a little flower garden with, which is quite a sustainable, interesting solution for the pollution problem. And very finally, all of you both here and at home, you can tweet using the hashtag Politico Sustainability. I think that's it. I've said everything. The events team are not going to shout at me later for missing something, so I can invite our first panel out. Please, guys, join me on stage. They're too busy talking about clean mobility here backstage. Yeah.
Hi.
So, first off, we have Maja Backeren-Martisch. She's the Deputy Director General at DG Move at the European Commission, has been working on transport affairs for a very long time, not least on e-mobility. And then we have Julia Poloskanova. She's the Senior Director for Vehicles and E-Mobility at Transport and Environment. And finally, delighted to have Alexander Vlaskamp. He's the CEO for MAN Truck and Bus. Welcome, Alexander.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us, guys. So our panel today is about e-mobility, and obviously we're going to address CO2 standards legislation for trucks, buses, to a certain extent cars as well. But principally, we're going to address the situation with charging infrastructure, because that's typically referenced by the auto industry as a major restricting factor, bottleneck in being able to transition to cleaner, greener mobility. First of all, Maja, can you give us a state of play update on what the situation is with the Alternative Fuels Infrastructure Directive, and maybe just briefly explain what the hell that is?
Well, first of all, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for having me here. As you've just said, the issue of do we have enough chargers? No, we don't have enough chargers, so we cannot roll out all the vehicles. Has been with us for quite some time, and this is really why within the Fit for 55 package, we try to break this deadlock and to really make sure that we will have enough charging stations. So this is what alternative fuel infrastructure regulation is all about. It came out, what is it, some year ago or so we are now in a situation that the co-legislators are really now deep into negotiations. We had the first trialogue on the 27th of October. What we are trying to do here is, for the first time ever, really bring in mandatory deployment targets. We tried with the previous proposal some 5-6 years ago, and we were just chased away from Schuman. So things have changed. Everybody now realizes that 90% transport is really responsible for over 1/3 of CO2 emissions, and it's sticking up there. It's not decreasing. So when we came back to the council with this proposal, which is for a regulation now, another major change, we were not kicked out. We were actually kept in, and everybody agreed. Now the issue at the moment, of course, and we can go perhaps into some more detail, is the level of ambition. So both the Parliament and the Council agree, again, even on the need to have mandatory deployment targets, but the devil's in the details and what the ambition will be. We'll have second trialogue beginning of this month now, and then we do hope that we could move towards finalization early in 23, but fingers crossed.
So no Christmas present deal by the end of the year?
Probably not, but maybe Chinese New Year's present.
Okay. So, Alexander, this is really, there is a lot of different standards in there and technical rules on the specification of charging points, where they should be located, for what class of vehicle and what kind of, whether it's hydrogen or e-mobility. You, as an industry guy, does the level of ambition that's currently being talked about persuade you that that's enough to build and sell electric trucks?
We have to do much more, Joshua, but let me first say that we are really glad to be part of this Sustainable Week, because transport of goods and people is the strong indication for a prosperous economy, and that is actually what we are facilitating. And of course, we currently, with the, I would say, brown platform, we want to hop to a green platform to make sure that we are not only emitting CO2, but actually that we are coming to a zero level by 2050, what we all agreed as a society in the Paris Agreement. And of course, Joshua, I'm an industry guy and representing our team here in our business, but we are also part of the society, you know. And we want to be part of the solution. And that means for us actually that until 2050, it should be zero. And that means actually that every decade from now, we should halve the emissions. And I think that's the trajectory we should work on. And for that, we need, of course, to continue to have good synchronization of all the regulations. And that starts, of course, with the enabling factors. And when we speak about infrastructure, it's about charging point. It's fantastic what Maya and her team has been brought on the way. And I think it's good to also have a clear deployment directive. But actually beyond that, what we need for the heavy-duty industry when it comes to charging all the trucks on the roads, we need also a similar regulation for the member states to charge all the depot points within the logistics industry, because that is normally where trucks are charged. Same is like with city buses, where we are already on a good trajectory when it comes to electrification. They are charged on the depots. So we really welcome the public AFIR, but we also need an AFIR actually locally for the depot points. Because just an imagination, a mid-size logistics center where 400 trucks goes or 500 goes in and out a day, when they need 500 kilowatt hours for a recharge, you need 25 megawatt on that spot every day. And therefore you need to hook up to the network and to the grid. And there we need actually activities to get it on, and synchronize that also, that we can stem actually all our investment in this area. We have the electric buses, the trucks. We have the charging equipment coming into place, the mega charging standard by 2024. Then we need to roll out the grid, and then we can really make this halving actually CO2 emissions per decade.
Okay, yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, and I think we'll come back to a lot of that because there's, for me, it's a very big question where the responsibility lies between the European Commission, which is blamed for a lot, and industry, which maybe could do its fair share too. I wonder to get Julia's perspective on that. Is AFIR enough as it stands to prompt the industry to switch electric?
So it's a really good question. First of all, just to say thanks a lot also for having TNE here. Can I just say it's hot in here? There's no energy crisis in this room, so that's already something.
Not sure it is very sustainable though.
No.
But on charging, so maybe to unpack this question, a few words on cars first and then trucks. For cars, I think that's really clear that AFIR regulation is really good. It's great, and we're really also very thankful, Maya, to you, to your team and everyone, to finally bring something binding, which is what is really beautiful about the way it's proposed, is that it is actually linked to the amount of EVs on the road. So it's no longer about 30 million, 100 million, 50 million. For each EV, there needs to be at least 1 kilowatt of public power. And that's really important. It means that everywhere there will be a minimum network. It will be aligned as the fleet grows. And actually not just in Germany, Netherlands or France, but also in countries like Poland and Romania, governments will have to act and invest. So that's really good. Where we are doing worse is actually on private charging, whether it's cars or whether it's trucks. So for cars, public charging is about 10–20%, and we have an entire regulation for them, and it's great. But private charging actually is 70–80%. We don't have a regulation. We have one article in a buildings directive, and we're not even talking about the real problem, which is existing buildings that need to be pre-cabled actually, so that drivers can easily install a charger. So a lot of work still to be done there. And that also leads me to trucks. Similarly, in the EPBD, in the buildings directive, we can actually have requirements to pre-cable, to prepare freight centers, logistics centers, depots, you know, so it's easier later to install the charging. So it's not enough. On the public side for trucks, it's really hard to judge at the moment. So we are very much in favor of what the Commission and the Parliament are doing, so giving more power to the pools, charging pools. Council is a bit of a problem there, but the issue is that we don't actually know how much power we will need, because we don't have certainty on the amount of electric trucks that are coming to market. So there, the key policy tool is actually truck CO2 standards, where we need to bring them up. We need to know when the phase out is, what are the volumes for 2030, and then we can start planning the grid and all the other investments. So actually we know how much power we need because we know how many trucks are coming.
So why can't you be very, very clear, just for our audience and for Julia today, tell us how many electric trucks are going to be out on the road with MAN logos on them?
Yeah, we can be very clear on that actually. We can and we're gearing up for a level of 30–50% of our normal yearly delivery in Europe for battery electric trucks by 2030. And why this range? Well, because this range is depending on the enabling function. That's one thing. Second thing is we want to be part of the solution. So from MAN Trucks, together with our sister brand Scania, within TRATON Group, we joined up also with peers in our industry, with Daimler Group and Volvo. We have invested $500 million already in actually starting a charging joint venture. So we want to be part of the solution. We want to be part of the solution because we're also investing in the group actually until 27, 2.6 billion euros in electrification of our vehicles, of the whole range, to have this ready by then 2030 and being on the market. However, we also would like to accelerate there. However, right now, actually, we get another, let's say, stepstone in a way, and it's unfortunately not a stepstone, it's too far under the water, and that is an Euro 7 legislation. And we cannot afford everything. We want to focus on halving this CO2 emission in this decade, and therefore we need actually to focus on battery electric vehicles. There might be some applications on hydrogen, but that is the way we want to go for, and that is where we pledge for also to synchronize this much more within the EU, make sure that we have actually every second year we are calibrating where we are, and then we are adjusting as we go. And we are committed within our industry, and especially also as MAN Truck and Bus, to halve CO2 emissions every decade so that we come to zero by 2050 and commit to the Paris Agreement.
So would you say there's too much red tape from Brussels there? You've committed to 2050. Inside the Trinity Group, you're very clear with your sister companies exactly what you're going to do. However, you don't want to be told, in the case of Euro 7, to reinvent engine technology and have to invest lots of R&D funding.
Exactly, Joshua. It should be technology open. We will be, our main trajectory and path will be, of course, for our applications, battery electric. What we also see, we need some other applications going forward, which you cannot immediately electrify. And there, of course, we have to be open because, again, you don't own a truck because you like it. You own a truck because you make business moving, you make society moving, and you operate buses also to transport people, to run business, but also when we look to city buses to make sure actually that we get more people from cars into buses and make sure that public transport is more accepted. And we see this in many sectors where we can move here, where we can actually be an accelerating part of the solution.
Yeah, I wanted to come to this actually at the end of the conversation, but seeing that we're kind of there already, we arrived early, let's talk about it now, and that's the looming CO2 standards for trucks and buses, which is coming next year. It's also delayed from the European Commission, but it's being prepared behind the scenes. Now, separately, everyone knows this, I guess, in the room, we have the 2035 phase-out date for sales of petrol and diesel cars and vans, but we don't have legislation for trucks yet, and that will be the overarching framework by which guys like yourself need to calibrate all your business over the coming decade. Maya, I know it's very difficult to talk about this because it hasn't been published yet, and it's not necessarily your department that's working on it anyway, but can you give us a state of play on where we stand with all of these kind of pieces of legislation?
Yeah, on the specific CO2 emission standards, the impact assessment is being worked on, and from what I understand, again, as you said, DG Move is not in charge, not directly in charge. Certainly we are to some extent involved in this file. So it is likely today at this stage that it will be adopted by early next year. But it's really all I can say at this stage when it comes to concrete timings.
We wait and see then, but...
Indeed.
Yeah, but I think it's fair for us...
There's still a little bit time to internally try to make it absolutely right.
And have surely furious debate over exactly where to set that calibration. But it's very fair to assume that part of the discussions will be around whether and when to set that zero emissions mandate for sales of new trucks and buses. Julia, you guys at T&E have done research on this specifically. When do you think it should be?
Yes, absolutely. So we looked into this. We asked TNO, a really well-known intellectual partner in this field, to actually look at when can most trucks, if not all trucks, in terms of business, so total cost of ownership, but also in terms of operation, go zero emission. And actually we see that by 2035, 99.8% of trucks on the road, so there are some exceptions there for a few more harder categories, can actually go electric. It's already cheaper than diesel on TCO, but also on operations. And if we add one extra stop to what is done today, all trucks can actually become battery electric in terms of business. So the date can be as early as 2035. What I wanted to bring in here is actually something that, is an elephant in the room today, and that's not just climate policy, but what's happening globally in terms of industrial momentum. US IRA has to be mentioned everywhere, right? They don't actually have a strong policy like we have on cars, on vans, hopefully soon on trucks. They're just unleashing money. The amounts of money are incredible. $40,000, for example, dollars for an electric truck. So the danger today is that while today we are still leaders in heavy-duty technology in Europe, America can very quickly snatch that position away from us. It takes time, it takes investment to retool, to really prepare your ecosystem to be electric truck infrastructure, including grids. So we need to set that clear phase-out goal now for around 2035 in our view, so we actually prepare and still remain that leadership. And we need to not just do the climate policy, we also need to beef it up by strong industrial strategy. Truck CO2 is not just climate policy, going electric on trucks, it's also industrial policy, but also things like smart tariffs, things like manufacturing support and subsidies for companies, local content requirements, all need to be considered. So we go quickly on electric trucks, but the infrastructure and the ecosystem is also here in Europe.
Okay, so then we have somebody from the industry who can respond to that very directly. Do you think it's practical what Julia said?
I think it's very practical that we go into the synchronization as I listen to you what we should do. And that synchronization we have to start. Of course, this is based on a lot of assumptions, the studies, and the various studies we do as well. And that's why I said, for instance, for 2030, it's a bandwidth of 30 to 50%, based on is the infrastructure in place in all along the public roads. Do the grids comply to actually making sure that the depots of the logistics stations are there, and that we have to orchestrate going forward. The other actually blockade and question mark is, as you were into when it comes to the Battery Act. Yeah? That is also a lot of items not clear for us. How should we deal with that, and what is the recycling mode? So that circularity has to be in place. But again, I think we are very much sharing the same goals to reach the Paris Agreement, and that means that actually by 2050 we have to be zero. That means that the vehicle park in Europe has to be zero emission. That means somewhere by 2040 it's maybe a small amount, those which are transporting the windmills through Europe, those which are transporting the transformation systems we need for the grid, those heavy haulage vehicles, some vocational vehicles, some outskirts where we say, okay, we might need to operate with a certain percentage of still with actually, but then ideally with biofuels or HVO accordingly. That's a small percentage, but then actually we can come into this trajectory of really going to 90-95% up to 2040. And I think that is what we have to do. We need to orchestrate that. We need to show, as you say as well, take the enabling functions into consideration as well, and then still have this goal ahead of us, but synchronize every second year, be technology open. We have battery electric, that will be the majority. We will also have hydrogen, fuel cell electrical vehicles, or even hydrogen engine, where it makes sense. But then our industry and our customers, they will decide upon it when it comes to the TCO. Because our customers, they decide based on a calculator what they actually will put into operation. And that's one thing. And the other thing, of course, is the regulation. The challenge what we have is that if we don't orchestrate this right, we might get into a deadlock. And what do I mean with that? Is that we have one regulation here, another regulation there. Customers will buy like hell, I would say, fossil trucks until one regulation kicks in, and then they wait until 2-3 years later before actually starting up with battery electrical vehicles. And that situation we can't have, because also the automotive industry is an innovator in Europe. It is where platforms are made, and especially the truck industry is actually a world-dominating industry. These are our engineers, our smart brains, our software engineers, which actually are grown up here in Europe and dominating the market. It's important as well.
It is
there
important.
are jobs on this as well.
But that being said, so you say, and everyone in the industry now says that 2050 climate net zero is completely achievable. You're all on board with that.
And exactly, right? Most of our peers are on board with this, not only due to regulation, but also most of our companies actually have been signing up to science-based targets and accordingly regulate ourselves.
Okay. So if you work back from that overall target, you would say that for cars and vans, for example, you need to look at the fleet renewal of roughly 12 years across the block, and therefore set it around 2035 to give that 15-year period for all the older polluting cars to be mostly cleared off the road through natural churn. That avoids a situation where you literally have to tell people they can't use the car they've been shuttling around with for years. Trucks and buses, you have a longer fleet renewal time, which surely then would dictate that you need to phase out sales of polluting vehicles way earlier to meet that 2050 target. So I just wonder what you propose should be the situation in the late 2030s, mid 2040s, when people that have bought engine-installed trucks then are forced to give them up.
Well, the advantage is that by then also we have still more renewable fuels ready, because when the cars are already down, there is more biofuel available actually for those last, let's say, tail of trucks through the last decade. So that's one thing. The other thing is also what we not even have been speaking about, and that's another regulation, that is dimensions. And basically, today already you can take a diesel truck and operate it with a double trailer, as in some of the markets, Spain, Scandinavia is used, and then the CO2 equivalent is significantly lower.
Yeah.
So again, we need to orchestrate and work on all means and do this in steps through decades, because there will be not one single shot on technology which will solve it all.
Let's just dwell on the technology openness theme that we talk about in Brussels all the time, it seems. My hydrogen, because this panel is specifically about e-mobility, but hydrogen does seem to offer a viable alternative, especially for long-distance, heavy-duty transport. What's the feeling inside the Commission on these dualing technologies?
No, I mean, first of all, the key is really to be technology neutral. And certainly in DG Move and in the Commission, for quite some years now, we have actually been supporting hydrogen. They have been, the industry, they have received quite some important incentives from the Horizon Europe, so from the scientific program, to really try to get them, get the technology out in the market. So personally, I'm quite optimistic, and I do believe in this industry, but as was just said, and as we clearly stated in our sustainable mobility strategy, there is no single solution, there's no silver bullet. We have to ensure that all these technologies are out there. It may seem relatively close, but we are still talking about a decent 25 years and more of transitions. Talking specifically of hydrogen, we were a little bit we were disappointed. I was being diplomatic by the lack of ambition among the member states. So this will be in our initial proposal, AFIR proposal, hydrogen figured together with the other charging stations. We didn't see this level of ambition in the council. So of course. We'll have to see what the final outcome is, of course, on the side of the Parliament. There's high ambition. But again, let us not deprive ourselves of one important tool from this toolbox. And having said that, in this technology, Europe truly is the global leader. So let's stay open and let's allow this technology to flourish together with the others.
Julia, I know you guys have very strong opinions about this issue. Well, how open should we be, and what do you think of biofuels and hydrogen and e-fuels?
So first of all, the goal is zero emission, right? And I think the regulation is quite clear about that. Car CO2 standards are zero emission. It's not a battery electric vehicle mandate. And similarly to truck CO2, we'd like to set a zero emission goal. When we look at trucks and the definition of the Commission, it's already actually quite technology neutral, right? So you have batteries, you have hydrogen, you also have hydrogen combustion that all qualify. So it's already there. And then it's really up to the market to decide. And I mean, Alexander, you're much better here to speak than me. What's the most cost-effective option there between hydrogen and battery trucks? Now, about fuels. We absolutely need all options to decarbonize overall in Europe. And when it comes to some hard-to-abate sectors, aviation, for example, steel, cement, we can't do that without renewable fuels. Synthetic fuels, e-kerosene, for example. But the amount of energy, electricity, capacity, and money these fuels will take, we simply own this to the sector, all sectors' decarbonization, not to steal it from them, to the sectors where not needed. In cars, it's not needed. In trucks, it will simply be expensive. It is not needed. So let's give it to the sectors where they're needed, set the right frameworks there. On biofuels, look, most of them are worse than what they're replacing. But there is this, small group of really advanced biofuels that can be part of the solution. But when we look at the volumes, it's max 10% for the entire fleet. It's just really, really small. So it's not this silver bullet that will help us, right? It's a mix of, it's a combination of things, but ultimately for new trucks, we're talking about batteries and hydrogen. And I wanted to add just one word about batteries, if I may, because we kind of going around this. It's a huge topic, right? I mean, we all working on critical raw materials. Materials Act as well. You discussed it at this summit. When we look at battery cells, we actually see a success story in Europe shaping up already. We can be self-sufficient in battery cells we need for cars, vans, trucks as well in Europe by 2027. We specifically looked at trucks. We will have enough supply of battery cells for trucks as well for the phase-out in 2035. So the industry is there, but that industry needs offtake. It needs certainty to invest. The decisions are being made. Look at Northvolt. They're already questioning their factory in Germany, actually, because that industrial certainty is not here. So that's where that mix of policies of ambitious truck CO2 standards phase out. So we all know we're going there to give that certainty. And the combination of things like money, industrial policy for this plant to build it here is really necessary. If we don't give the signal to these companies, all this momentum we have now on battery cells will disappear, and it will go to America, and then bye-bye decarbonization. Thank you.
So many different points there. I think all of them are targeted in a way. Alexander, did that make sense to you? Because you're the guy that actually has to make these decisions.
It made pretty well sense what Julia said, and it claims for better synchronization of the different regulations. It claims actually for instead of moving from regulations, we should actually incentivize what to do right and to do the things right. And to do the things right actually is where I share with Julia is invest more in battery electric, invest more in battery systems, in knowledge, in chemistry, and actually also in sourcing it in Europe, which is possible on our continent as well. The next step, of course, is then also where actually we share the perspective, and that is that we need hydrogen for the hard-to-abate sectors. And as I mentioned before, we have signed up to the science-based targets, and that means scope 1 and 2 we have to also live up to. That means that that truck, which is close to 5 tons of steel, basically has to be also carbon neutral produced, and therefore we need hydrogen within the steel process. So the concepts are there. But then, of course, we only earn the money once, and we can only reinvest it also once. And right now, I already mentioned the amounts we are investing in battery electric. We actually have a trajectory when it comes to actually our brown, so to say, brown platform with fossils or with renewables. But we want to stay on that track. Right now, again, we get the request to move into Euro 7, and that means additional investments. That means that we have to make a choice. Okay, do we survive? Do we avoid not to come into a deadlock situation, what I described before? And actually, okay, if we have to invest there, again in this last Euro 7, which not makes sense because it will only support 2% actually CO2 reduction on the fleet, where you can do that much quicker, earlier, already today, with other measures. But that money, we will not invest actually in where you were into when it comes to battery cell production, etc. So that is clearly, of course, then that manufacturers of battery cells or producing it ourselves, we will not go into that decision mode when we all have to follow regulation, which actually are regulating the old thinking, whether we actually want to go to orchestrating ourselves towards actually 2050 and do this across the industries, across the society, so really do this together.
It's not the first time I've heard an industry captain say there's too much EU legislation coming our way.
Yeah.
But in this instance, I understand we have a lot of moving parts right now, a lot of burden on investment. I just wanted to ask you, before we go to the separate Q&A bit for the people just in the room, on this subject of global competitiveness, which we talk about all the time in Brussels now as well, clearly you swim in a far bigger pool, you're part of a far larger group. Do you have concerns about sourcing the kind of raw materials and critical raw materials needed to produce battery cells? Is that something you worry about, or is that what the bosses in Wolfsburg worry about more?
No. Of course, we actually owe it to our own people and our own team at MAN Truck and Bus and our sister company Scania as well to secure our own path in the future, and that is where our teams work on. And that's including then also also, as you were into our group belongingness with Volkswagen, actually, that yes, we make actually advantage of that, of being present everywhere and making sure that we are looking far ahead when it comes to sourcing of the raw material, and also there sourcing it in a sustainable way. And I think there we have a fantastic opportunity to work accordingly along the group and make part of the solution there. So that's the focus we have.
Okay.
When it comes to your comment on industry captain, of course, let's say challenging the EU, I think we actually want to have more regulation. We want to have the battery electric depots at the logistics center. So that is where we want to team up. That is what we're calling for. We are regulating ourselves beyond the EU by signing up to the science-based targets, because our customers and their customers will demand it very soon as well. So from that perspective, we actually see that we are part of this society where we have to live in by 2050 as well.
Yeah. Just to come to mind very, very quickly before we go into the Q&A, I think this is an interesting point, because you're also in a tough spot, right? Everyone asks you to mandate these targets for charging infrastructure and hydrogen refueling stations. You do so, and then the member countries tell you actually they don't really like that very much. And so there is clearly more work to be done in this sector, and industry needs more work to be done to justify the massive investments that are needed. Are there serious discussions within the Commission about how to address this point, either in new legislation entirely or by revising another piece of technical legislation to target depots and target power grids?
I think at this stage we really, with the Fit for 55 package, we put a lot on the table. So it's being negotiated. We are really focused on this, what is it, 13, 14 proposals. Now, mind you, things are moving so quickly. Each and every one of them does have a review clause, and we will certainly start coming in. But what I really want to stress here, maybe as kind of a final message from my side, we cannot over-regulate either. It's really, we are a union of 27. There's a quite different in some cases situation. We have Sweden with almost 50% of electric cars. We have Western Europe with 20% and rising. But then we also have parts of our union with far, far, far lower uptake. And the last thing we can allow to happen is to really have some kind of a division here. So we really have to be very mindful to solve this. There's really substantial investment available from EU budget in recovery resilience plans. There's quite a few member states, certainly Central Eastern European, who foresee a lot of investment from these funds into electric charging. And then of course we also have our Connecting Europe facility, we have the EIB funding and everything, but it is complex. At the same time, nothing will happen overnight. We do have sufficient, I dare say, period ahead of us to get the things right and to then also fine-tune and do the things needed. So really, we have to work together with the member states, with the industry, us in the Commission, certainly the Parliament, and then also it's all about them, European citizens.
Okay. All right, well, on that note, let's bring the live-streamed part of this session to a close. And thank you for tuning in, everyone online and those in the room. Stay seated for just a few minutes for some music to play, and then we'll do questions. Thanks.
This is an age of disruption, of profound revolutionary change.
What we're really asking ministers is to empower the ambassadors.
The only thing that you really push forth is the truth.
You don't see many women represented when it comes to the decisions as to how to handle the pandemic.